The rice cooker beeped twice, and I pulled it off the counter before the sound could finish. Ginger chicken on the left burner, greens on the right, table set for two. This was my life now. I used to draw buildings that touched the sky. Now I timed dinner so it would be hot when my wife walked in. Smells good, Vanessa said, dropping her bag by the door. She didn't look at the food. She looked at her phone. Chicken and greens. Your favorite? I said. I can't eat much tonight. The gala starts at 7. She finally glanced up. You're coming, right? Wouldn't miss it. Somebody has to hold your coat. She almost smiled. Almost. I met Vanessa Cole 9 years ago in a design studio that smelled like fresh paint and ambition. Back then, I was the one with plans, literal blueprints, 3 of them accepted by the city before I turned 26. She was still an assistant at her father's marketing firm, hungry, sharp, always the last one to leave the office. You could run this place someday, I told her once. With you next to me, she said. That was the deal. I remembered it like a contract I signed without reading the fine print. When her father got sick, she needed help holding the company together. I stepped back from my firm. Just for a year, I told myself. 1 year turned into 5. My name stopped showing up on new buildings. Hers started showing up on magazine covers. At the gala, I stood near the bar in a suit that still fit but didn't feel like mine. A waiter handed me a name tag. It read, Mr. Vanessa Cole. Cute, I muttered, sticking it to my jacket anyway. A woman I didn't recognize touched my arm near the bar. You're Vanessa's husband, aren't you? She's done incredible things with this company. She has, I said. What do you do? There it was. The question I'd learned to dodge without looking like I was dodging. I keep the house running. Somebody has to. That's sweet, she said, in the tone people use when they've already stopped listening. She turned back toward the stage before I finished nodding. I used to have a real answer for that question. I design buildings. I have 3 in this city with my name on the permit. Now I had a name tag that wasn't even mine. Daniel. Grace found me before the first drink was gone. My sister never blended into a crowd. She cut through it. You look like you're at a funeral. I'm at a party for people who talk about themselves in the third person. Funny. She lowered her voice. Have you noticed him? She tilted her chin across the room. Vanessa stood near the stage, laughing at something. Beside her, a tall man in a navy suit had one hand resting on the small of her back. Not gripping, just resting, like it belonged there. That's Marcus Kane, Grace said. New investment partner. Very new. So he's touching my sister-in-law like he owns stock in her. Grace. I'm serious, Daniel. Look at her face. She never laughs like that with you anymore. I watched Vanessa tip her head back, laughing at something Marcus said. She used to laugh like that with me, back when we split a bottle of cheap wine on the floor of our first apartment and talked about the buildings I'd design someday. She's just being polite. He's a business partner, I said. You always do this. Do what? Explain away things you already feel. I didn't answer, because she wasn't wrong, and I hated when she wasn't wrong. I made my way toward Vanessa, weaving through waiters and small talk I didn't want to make. When I got close, I saw her phone screen light up in her hand, a name, a string of texts, gone before I could read a word. She flipped the phone face down against her thigh so fast the motion looked rehearsed. Hey, I said. Everything okay? Fine. Work stuff. She smiled, too quick, too even. You remember Marcus? We met at the ribbon cutting. Marcus extended a hand. His grip was firm, his smile firmer. Daniel, right? Vanessa talks about you. Does she? All good things, he said, and Vanessa laughed again, a half-second too fast, like she was covering something. I bet, I said. The rest of the night blurred into small talk and stiff photos. I smiled when a camera pointed at me. I nodded when someone called me the man behind the woman, like it was a compliment. By the time we got home, my jaw ached from holding a face I didn't feel. Vanessa peeled off her coat and tossed it over the chair by the door, the way she always did, already reaching for her laptop. I have an early call tomorrow, she said. Investor stuff. Don't wait up. When don't I? She didn't hear the edge in my voice, Or she chose not to. She disappeared into the office down the hall, door clicking shut behind her. I stood there a moment, looking at her coat slumped over the chair like it had given up too. I picked it up to hang it properly. Habit, not suspicion, I told myself. My hand brushed something stiff in the inside pocket. Paper. I pulled it out before I let myself think twice. A receipt. The Hartwell Hotel, downtown, a room booked for 2 nights that week. One of those nights was a Tuesday. She told me she was working late at the office, finishing a pitch deck she said kept her there past midnight. I read the date 3 times, like it might change if I looked hard enough. It didn't. I stood in our living room, coat in one hand, receipt in the other, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt something other than tired. I felt awake. Down the hall, I heard her voice through the door, low and quick, the way people talk when they don't want to be overheard. I couldn't make out the words. I didn't need to. I folded the receipt along its old crease and slid it back into the coat pocket exactly where I'd found it. Whatever came next, I wanted to choose the moment myself. Not hand it to her on a silver plate the second she walked out that door. I hung the coat on its hook and went to bed like nothing had changed. But everything had. I didn't sleep. I lay next to Vanessa and stared at the ceiling, replaying the receipt in my head like a scene I could rewind. Part of me wanted to shake her awake and demand an answer. A bigger part of me stayed still, because I already knew what I'd do if she looked me in the eye and lied. Nothing. I'd do nothing. That was the problem. By morning she was gone before I opened my eyes, off to her early call. I sat at the kitchen table with cold coffee and my phone in my hand, scrolling to a name I hadn't called in months. Priya picked up on the second ring. Well, look who remembered my number. I need to ask you something. That bad? Huh? Her voice shifted. All business now. Go ahead. If your husband found a hotel receipt in your coat pocket for a night you told him you were working, what would that mean? Silence on the line. Then, Daniel, is this about you or a friend? Does it matter? It matters if you're about to lie to a lawyer. I let out a breath. Me. It's me. Okay. She didn't sound surprised, which somehow hurt more. Have you asked her about it? No. Why not? Because if I ask and she lies, I have to decide what to do about it. And if I don't ask, I get to keep pretending. That's the most honest thing you've said to me in 2 years. Thanks. I'm not done. Her voice sharpened. You've been disappearing for years, Daniel. Not just from her, from yourself. You gave up your firm, your name on those buildings, your whole identity, and you told everyone it was a choice. Was it? I didn't answer right away. Daniel. I don't know anymore, I said. It felt like the right thing at the time. The right thing for who? For us. There is no us if there's no you in the equation. She sighed, and I heard papers shuffling on her end, like she was trying to get back to work and couldn't. You used to call me at midnight to talk about cantilevers and skylines. Now you call me to ask if a receipt means your marriage is over. Do you hear the difference? I hear it. Then do something about it. Not for her. For you. She paused. Look, don't confront her yet. Not until you actually know something. Get proof. Real proof. Not a receipt that could be explained away in one sentence. And then what? Then you decide who you want to be when you finally say something. Not before. I thanked her and hung up, and for a long moment I just sat there, coffee going colder, the word disappearing stuck in my chest like a splinter. The receipt listed the Hartwell Hotel and a checkout date 2 days out. I told myself I was just going to walk past. Just look. That was all. I parked across the street a little before 6, telling myself I had an errand nearby, a lie I didn't even believe while I was thinking it. The lobby doors were glass, gold-trimmed, the kind of place that charged more for the view than the room. I waited in my car like a stranger casing my own life. At 6:40, the doors opened. Vanessa walked out first, laughing at something over her shoulder. Marcus followed a step behind, one hand low on her back again, the same spot from the gala, like it had a permanent home there. She turned into him, said something I couldn't hear, and he laughed too, easy, like they'd done this 100 times before. They weren't hiding. That was the part that broke something loose in my chest. They weren't glancing over their shoulders or standing 3 feet apart to be safe. They looked like a couple who had stopped being careful because they'd stopped believing they needed to be. For a second I thought about calling out her name, just to see what her face would do. Would she flinch? Laugh it off? Or would she look at me the way you look at a stranger who's wandered somewhere they don't belong? I could have gotten out of the car. I could have crossed the street and asked her, right there on the sidewalk, in front of everyone, what exactly this was. Some other version of me, maybe the version from 9 years ago, would have. I just watched. Marcus opened the door of a black sedan for her. She slid in without looking back. He shut the door, tapped the roof twice like he was sealing something, and walked around to the driver's side. I sat there until the car turned the corner and disappeared, and then I sat there longer because I didn't trust my hands on the wheel yet. I drove home going the speed limit exactly, both hands at 10 and 2, like following the rules on the road could make up for everything falling apart everywhere else. At home, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't cook. I sat on the couch in the dark and let myself do the math I'd been avoiding for years. 5 years since I stepped back from my firm. 5 years of galas and name tags and dinners timed to her schedule. 5 years I told myself were an investment in something we were building together. I thought I'd been building a marriage. Turned out I'd just been building her alibi. Her key turned in the lock a little after 9. She walked in with her coat already half off, phone in hand, not even looking up. Sorry I'm late. Client dinner ran long, she said. You didn't wait for me, did you? No, I said. I ate. Good. I'm exhausted. She dropped her bag on the chair, the same coat pocket probably still holding secrets I already knew. How was your day? Quiet, I said. She didn't ask anything else. She never did anymore. I watched her cross the kitchen, open the fridge, pour herself a glass of wine like it was any other Tuesday, and something in me that had been bending for 5 years finally stopped bending. It didn't break loud. It didn't break with shouting or slammed doors. It just went still and cold, the way water goes to ice, quiet, complete, and impossible to undo. I'm going to bed, I said. I'll be up soon, she said, not looking up from her phone. I walked down the hall, and for the first time since I found that receipt, I didn't feel like the man in the corner anymore. I felt like a man keeping score. He said he'd meet you Saturday. Noon. The diner on 5th, Grace said over the phone, like she was daring me to say no. I don't need a father-son reunion right now, Grace. You don't need one. You need him. There's a difference. It's been 2 years. So call it 3 if you keep avoiding it. Her voice softened, just barely. Daniel, I know what's going on with Vanessa. I'm not blind. You need someone in your corner who isn't me screaming I told you so. I didn't answer for a long moment. Fine. Saturday. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease, the kind of place that hadn't changed a menu or a chair since I was a kid. Tom was already in the corner booth, flannel shirt, hands wrapped around a mug like he was holding onto something steady. You look thin, he said, before I even sat down. Good to see you too, Dad. He almost smiled. Sit down before I stand up and hug you, and neither of us wants that. Saturday. The waitress poured coffee without asking. For a minute neither of us said anything, the silence doing the work 2 years apart should have already done. Grace tells me things aren't good, Tom said finally. With Vanessa. Grace talks too much. Grace loves you too much. There's a difference. He turned his mug slowly on the table. You want to tell me, or you want me to guess? She's seeing someone. Her business partner. Saying it out loud for the first time felt like setting down something I'd been carrying without realizing how heavy it was. Tom didn't flinch. You confront her? No. Why not? Because I don't know what I'd do after. Yell? Leave? Stay and pretend? I don't have a plan, so I've just been standing still. Tom nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. You remember the Delaney house? Out on Route 9. The one that collapsed during the storm. Whole east wall came down. 22 years I built houses, and I still remember standing in that wreckage thinking there was nothing left to save. He took a sip of his coffee. You know what I did? Rebuilt it. Eventually. But first I stood there and screamed at that pile of bricks like it owed me an explanation. Screamed at the storm, screamed at the contractor who cut corners on the foundation, screamed at God for good measure. He set the mug down. None of it moved a single brick. So what did? I picked one up, just one, set it aside, picked up another. He looked at me steady, the way he used to when I was a kid learning to swing a hammer. You don't rebuild a house by screaming at the rubble, Daniel. You rebuild it one brick at a time. Same with a life. I sat with that for a moment, turning it over. What if I don't know which brick to pick up first? You do. You've known for 5 years. You just stopped believing it mattered. He reached across the table, tapped the back of my hand once, gruff, unpracticed. Stop waiting for her to blow up your life so you have permission to rebuild your own. I left that diner with something loosening in my chest that had been tight for longer than I wanted to admit. I didn't go home. I drove straight to Meridian Architecture, my old firm, the one I still technically had a stake in, the one I hadn't set foot in for over a year. The receptionist didn't recognize me at first. Then she did, and her eyebrows went up like I was a ghost. Sasha's in the back, she said. She still keeps your old sketches pinned up. Won't let anyone take them down. I found Sasha Lynn hunched over a drafting table, hair falling out of a bun, staring at a model like it had personally offended her. You're not supposed to be here, she said without looking up. I still own 11% of this place. That got her attention. She looked up, blinked twice. Daniel Reyes. In the flesh. I thought you retired to become somebody's +1. Working on that title change. I nodded at the model on her table. What's wrong with it? Everything. The cantilever won't hold the load the client wants, but if I shrink it, I lose the whole reason they hired us. I've redone the math 6 times. I stepped closer, studied the angles for a second. You're fighting the load instead of redirecting it. Move your support column here. I tapped a spot on the model. Let the weight travel down through the corner instead of the center. You keep your cantilever, you keep your load capacity, and you don't need to redesign the whole facade. Sasha stared at the spot, then at me, then back at the spot. That actually works. It's basic transfer logic. You've done harder problems than this. Not in front of you, apparently. She grabbed a pencil, started sketching fast, muttering to herself. God, I forgot what it was like watching you do this. I stood there watching her work, and something in my chest unlocked that had been sealed shut for 5 years. I wasn't Mr. Vanessa Cole in that room. I wasn't a name tag or a coat holder. I was just an architect solving a problem, and for the first time in longer than I wanted to admit, I felt like myself. Come back, Sasha said, not looking up from her sketch. Not officially. Just help me with this one. Nobody has to know. Nobody has to know, I repeated. I liked the sound of that more than I expected to. I didn't tell Vanessa where I'd been that day. She didn't ask. 2 days later, Priya called instead of texted, which meant it was serious. I did some digging on Marcus Kane. As a favor, don't get used to it. And his investment numbers don't add up. He's shown your wife's board returns that don't match filings I found on 3 other deals he's run in the last 5 years. Either he's bad at math, or he's very good at something else. I sat with the phone against my ear, feeling something shift into place, quiet and certain. Keep digging, I said. Quietly. Always, Priya said. You sound different, by the way. I feel different. Different how? Like I stopped screaming at the rubble, I said. My dad's words, not mine. Turns out he was right about something for once. Miracles happen, Priya said, and I could hear the smile in it. I hung up, and for the first time since I found that receipt, I wasn't just keeping score. I was building something of my own again. Priya texted me an address and a name, Elena Ford, with no explanation except, she'll talk to you. Trust me. The coffee shop was small, tucked between a laundromat and a shuttered bookstore. Elena was already at a corner table, early 30s, sharp-eyed, stirring a coffee she didn't seem to want. You're Daniel, she said, before I sat down. Priya said you had questions about Marcus Kane. I do. Then I already know how this story ends for you. She pushed the extra chair out with her foot. Sit. I've told this story before. It doesn't get easier, but it gets faster. Saturday. How do you know him? I was engaged to him 4 years ago. She said it flat, like she'd sanded the emotion off the words a long time ago. My family owned a logistics company. Marcus came in as an investment partner, charming, brilliant, always had the right number ready before you asked the question. Sounds familiar. It should. He doesn't change the playbook, just the city. She wrapped both hands around her mug. He got close to me first, then my father, then the board. By the time anyone noticed money moving strange, he'd already restructured half our accounts under his signing authority. What happened? The money dried up. Turned out half our investor confidence was Marcus telling investors what they wanted to hear while he moved capital into accounts nobody could trace fast enough. When it collapsed, he was already gone. New city, new company, new fiancé, probably new lie by the time the ink dried on our lawsuit. Did you ever get any of it back? Some. Enough to keep the lawyers paid and my father out of bankruptcy. Not enough to undo what it did to him. He doesn't trust his own judgment anymore. That's the part Marcus really takes from you, not the money, the certainty that you can read people at all. I sat back, feeling something cold settle low in my stomach. You're saying he's doing the same thing to Vanessa's company. I'm saying I'd bet my last dollar on it. Elena looked at me steady. The question is what you're going to do about it. Warn her, you mean? Or not? I'm not going to tell you what to do with the woman who broke your heart. I'm just telling you what happened to mine, so you're not surprised when it happens to hers. She finally took a sip of the coffee she'd been stirring the whole time. I wish someone had warned me. That's the only reason I'm sitting here. That was the question, wasn't it? I turned it over in my head the whole drive home. Part of me wanted to let it happen. Let Vanessa learn the hard way what it felt like to trust the wrong person completely, the way I'd trusted her for 5 years while she quietly stepped away from our marriage. There was a version of me that could sit back and call it karma and sleep just fine. But another part of me, the part Tom had cracked open at that diner, didn't want to be a man who let a woman walk into a fire just because she'd once let me stand in one alone. I didn't call Vanessa. Not yet. I needed to know more before I said anything that couldn't be unsaid. 2 days later, Sasha called with something that had nothing to do with Marcus. Remember the Hollis project? The one I fixed with your cantilever trick. Her voice had an edge of excitement she wasn't bothering to hide. The client saw the final renders. He wants to meet the architect who solved it. That's you, by the way, whether you want the credit or not. I told you, nobody needs to know I was involved. He specifically asked for you, Daniel, by name, said he heard Daniel Reyes still had it. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, feeling something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Pride, maybe, or just the ghost of who I used to be, finally catching up to who I was becoming again. Set up the meeting, I said. Already did. Wednesday, 10 a.m. Wear something that isn't a name tag. I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in what felt like months. That Wednesday meeting turned into my first real client since I retired. A boutique hotel renovation, small but real, with my name back on the contract where it belonged. I didn't tell Vanessa. She didn't ask what I did with my days anymore. That silence, which used to feel like erasure, had started to feel like room to breathe. Vanessa's world was cracking in ways I wasn't causing, and I was building mine back up quietly in the space it left behind. The call from Howard Cole came on a Thursday night, while I was reviewing floor plans at the kitchen table. Daniel, it's Howard. Vanessa's father never called me directly. That alone told me something was wrong. Is Vanessa there? She's still at the office. Everything okay? No, he said, and for the first time in the years I'd known him, Howard Cole sounded rattled. I've been going through the Q3 transfers myself. There's a payment routed through an account I don't recognize. 6 figures, moved through Marcus's signing authority, no board approval on file. I felt my pulse pick up, though my voice stayed even. What are you going to do? I called an emergency board meeting. Tomorrow morning, 8 sharp. I want eyes on every account Marcus has touched before he can touch anything else. He paused. Daniel, I built this company from nothing. I trusted my daughter to protect it. I need to know if I made a mistake trusting him. I thought of Elena, stirring a coffee she didn't want, telling me she'd bet her last dollar on exactly this moment. You should ask Vanessa directly, I said. Tomorrow. In the meeting. I intend to, Howard said. I just hope she has an answer I can live with. He hung up before I could say anything else, and I sat there at the kitchen table, floor plans forgotten, watching the walls I'd spent 5 years hiding behind start to come down. Not because I'd torn them apart, but because they'd never been built to hold this much weight. I thought about calling Vanessa right then, telling her everything Elena had told me, giving her one night's warning before the meeting broke her world apart. I picked up my phone. I set it back down. Some bricks, I was learning, weren't mine to move. Priya texted me updates through the morning, one after another, each one landing like a stone dropped into still water. Board meeting started. Howard's got the transfer records on the screen. Marcus is denying everything. Wait, he just said Vanessa signed off on all of it. I sat at the kitchen table, packing folder after folder for the Hollis project, and read each message twice, feeling strangely calm. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. I could see the whole thing anyway, like I'd watched it happen 100 times before it did. It's bad, Priya wrote. Howard is asking her point blank if she authorized the transfers. She says no. Marcus says yes. Her signature's on half the paperwork. Is good, Priya added a minute later. He had an answer ready before Howard finished the question. Practiced. Like he'd done this exact scene before. He has, I texted back. Ask Elena. She'll tell you exactly how this ends. I set my phone down and finished packing the folder. I already knew how this would end for Vanessa. I'd known since the diner with Tom, since the hotel lobby, since the receipt in her coat pocket. Some things you can see coming from a long way off if you finally let yourself look. She got home a little after 8, and I heard it before I saw her. Keys dropped on the floor instead of the bowl by the door, a sound I'd never heard her make in 9 years of marriage. When she walked into the bedroom, her makeup was streaked, her blazer wrinkled like she'd been gripping the fabric all day. She stopped in the doorway when she saw the suitcase open on the bed. What is this? I'm leaving, I said, folding a shirt, not looking up. Not tonight, necessarily. But soon. I wanted to start. Daniel, today was, her voice cracked. Today was the worst day of my life. Marcus stood up in front of the entire board and said I authorized fraud. My own father looked at me like he didn't recognize me. I know. You know. She stared at me. How do you know? Priya's been looking into Marcus for weeks. On my request. I set the shirt in the suitcase, calm, steady. I found a hotel receipt in your coat pocket 2 months ago, Vanessa. I've known about the affair since before you knew your company was in trouble. The color drained from her face. You knew. This whole time, you knew, and you said nothing. I said nothing because I didn't know what saying something would fix. You'd already decided who you wanted. I wasn't going to beg for a seat I'd been pushed out of years ago. You could have warned me. About the money, about what he was doing to the company, if nothing else. I thought about it. I admitted. I met a woman named Elena Ford a few weeks ago. He did this exact thing to her family's business 4 years ago. Same charm, same signatures, same disappearing act once the money ran dry. Part of me wanted to let you find out the hard way, the same way I found out about the two of you. And the other part didn't want to be a man who let someone walk into a fire just because she'd once left me standing in one. I shrugged. I don't know if that makes me generous or just a coward who couldn't pick up the phone in time. She sank onto the edge of the bed like her legs had given out. It's over. With Marcus. It wasn't what you think. He made me feel important. Seen. Like I'm matted outside of being somebody's wife who used to have her own life. You had that with me once, I said. You just stopped looking. I know. Tears started. Real ones, not the practice kind. I know, Daniel. I got so wrapped up in the company, in being somebody, that I forgot the person who helped me become her. I didn't know what I had until today, watching my father's face while Marcus destroyed me in front of everyone. I kept thinking, Daniel would never do this to me. Daniel would never let me fall like this. I'm not the one who let you fall, I said. Marcus is. You handed him the ladder. Please. She reached for my hand, and I let her take it for a second before I pulled it back gently. Please don't leave. Not now. Not when everything is falling apart. I need you. You needed me for 5 years, Vanessa. I was right here. I closed the suitcase, quiet, final. You just stopped seeing me as someone worth needing. That's not true. It is. I sat down across from her, close enough to see every line of exhaustion on her face, far enough that I wasn't reaching for her anymore. You know what the worst part was? It wasn't the receipt. It wasn't watching you leave that hotel with him. It was standing in a room full of your colleagues wearing a name tag that said Mr. Vanessa Cole, and realizing I'd let that become my whole identity. I did that. Not you. I let myself disappear so you could shine, and somewhere along the way I forgot I was allowed to shine too. You are, she whispered. You always were. I know that now. I stood, lifted the suitcase off the bed. It felt lighter than it should have for everything I was carrying out of that room. I'm not leaving to punish you, Vanessa. I'm not walking out that door because I want you to suffer or because I've been planning some big revenge this whole time. I'm leaving because I finally remembered I don't need your approval to feel like a man. I stopped being invisible the day I stopped waiting for you to notice me. She stood too, reaching for me one more time, desperate. What about us? 9 years, Daniel. Doesn't that count for something? It counts for everything I learned, I said, about what I'll accept and what I won't going forward. I'm scared, she admitted, voice breaking completely now. The board might press charges. My father might never trust me again. And now you're leaving too. I don't know how to do any of this alone. You're not doing it alone, I said, softer than I meant to. You have your father. You have lawyers. You have people who can help you fight the legal side of this. What you don't have anymore is me pretending your problems are more important than my own life. Will I ever see you again? She asked, quieter now, like the fight had finally gone out of her. Probably. This city isn't that big. I picked up the suitcase. But not like this. Not you crying and me packing. I don't want to be your emergency contact anymore, Vanessa. I want to be a man with his own life again. I walked toward the door. She didn't follow, didn't call out, just stood there in the middle of the bedroom we'd shared for 9 years, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her look. At the door, I stopped, one hand on the frame. For what it's worth, I said, not turning around. I hope you get through this. I really do. I just can't be the one standing next to you while you do it anymore. I walked out into the night air, suitcase in hand, and for the first time since I could remember, the silence behind me didn't feel like something I was running from. It felt like something I'd finally earned. 6 months. That's how long it took to go from a name tag that said Mr. Vanessa Cole to a building with my actual name carved into the cornerstone. You're pacing, Sasha said, straightening a stack of programs on the welcome table. Stop pacing. It's making the caterers nervous. I'm not pacing. You've walked past this table 4 times in 90 seconds. I stopped walking. The lobby of the Hollis building buzzed around us. String lights hung between exposed beams, the cantilevered glass wall I'd sketched on Sasha's drafting table catching the last orange light of evening. My name was on the plaque by the door. Reyes and Lynn Architecture. 6 months of quiet work, and it finally had a face. It's a good building, Daniel, Sasha said, softer now. Stop looking for what's wrong with it. I'm not looking for what's wrong with it. I'm looking for what's next. That's almost healthy. I'm proud of you. Don't get used to it. I'm still going to redraw that stairwell 3 more times before I'm happy. I know. I already ordered more tracing paper. Grace found us near the bar, wine glass already in hand. This is insane. You built this. Actually built it, not just held someone's coat while they built something. Low bar, but I'll take the compliment. Dad's over there telling anyone who'll listen that his son is an architect, like we didn't already know that for the last 10 years. She nodded toward the corner, where Tom stood in an actual suit, gesturing at the ceiling like he was explaining load-bearing beams to a stranger who hadn't asked. He looks happy, I said. He's insufferable. Same thing, with him. Grace squeezed my arm. I'm proud of you, you know, for picking the bricks back up. That's Dad's line. I stole it. It's a good line. Priya arrived last, scanning the room like she was still building a case file out of habit. Marcus is officially gone, she said. No preamble, because that was Priya. Fled the country 2 weeks ago. Sek's still trying to track the accounts. Word is he's got at least 2 more women lined up in 2 different cities under 2 different names. Of course he does. Elena says it's the fastest she's ever seen him move. Guess Howard's board wasn't as forgiving as he hoped. Small mercies. Vanessa's cooperating with investigators. Might avoid charges herself if she keeps talking. Her father stepped back in as CEO. Company's on life support, but it's breathing. Priya studied my face. You good? I'm good, I said, and meant it. I didn't see Vanessa's text until later that night, after the crowd thinned and the string lights dimmed to a warmer glow. Can we talk? Not about us. Just talk. 10 minutes. I almost didn't answer. Then I thought about bricks and rubble and rebuilding one piece at a time, and I typed back, fine. Tomorrow. Coffee, not dinner. She looked different the next morning. Thinner, tired in a way makeup couldn't quite cover, no blazer, no boardroom armor. Just Vanessa, sitting across a small table with her hands wrapped around a cup she wasn't drinking. I heard about the opening, she said. Congratulations. I mean that. Thank you. I looked it up online. The building's beautiful, Daniel. It looks like you. It should. I designed every wall in it. She smiled, small and sad. I lost everything, you know. The company, my father's trust, most of my board seats. The SEC still hasn't decided if I'm a fraud or a victim. Some days I don't know which one I'd pick either. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said, and I was, even after everything. Are you? Really? Really? I didn't want this for you, Vanessa. I wanted you to wake up. I didn't want you to lose everything to do it. Her eyes filled, but she blinked it back. I keep thinking about what you said. That night you left. About not needing my approval to feel like a man. She turned the cup slowly on the table. I don't think I know who I am without the title anymore. CEO Vanessa Cole. That's the only version of me I built for the last 10 years. Then build a different one, I said. Slower this time. One piece at a time. Sounds familiar. My father's line. I stole it. It's a good line. I paused. You could start with something small. A hobby. A friend you haven't called in years. Something that isn't a title on a business card. Grace mentioned you started rock climbing, she said, almost smiling. That's new. Sasha's idea. Turns out I like things that make me focus on one hold at a time. She almost laughed, and for a second I saw a flicker of the woman I met in that design studio 9 years ago, before galas and name tags and everything that came after. I hope you find her, I said. The version of you that existed before all this. She was good. I liked her a lot. Do you think we could ever? No, I said, gently, before she could finish the question. Not because I hate you. I don't. Not anymore. But I finally have a life I built myself, and I'm not interested in handing it back to anyone, not even for old time's sake. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer and needed to hear it anyway. Okay, I understand. Take care of yourself, Vanessa. You too, Daniel. I stood, left enough cash on the table to cover both coffees, and walked out into a morning that felt cleaner than it had any right to. I didn't look back at the coffee shop. I looked forward, toward the skyline, toward the building with my name on it, toward Sasha probably already at her desk sketching the next impossible thing she'd ask me to solve. I thought about calling my father, just to tell him the bricks were finally starting to look like something. I thought about Grace, who would ask 100 questions about the coffee and roll her eyes at every careful answer I gave her. I thought about Priya, closing out one more file on Marcus Kane, one more name added to a list of people who'd learned the hard way that charm isn't the same thing as character. I used to think winning meant watching the person who broke you fall apart in front of everyone. I was wrong. Winning was walking into a building I built with my own hands, not because I destroyed anyone to get there, but because I finally refused to stay small. That was the only revenge that ever mattered.